From beyond the farthest reaches of our galaxy they come. Two brains pulsing with a strange energy. These space brains come to share their love of science fiction movies.
Hi, and welcome to Space Brains, the show where we joy watch sci-fi movies and then talk about what was good and what was great. I'm Surrey, and this is Mark.
Hiya. Tonight, it's a classic. We are talking about Event Horizon.
Event Horizon, this is your spoiler warning. If you've not seen this film,
You're silly. You're very
should
silly.
see it. But go watch it.
Yeah.
It is available on Netflix. It's also available at op shops for $2,
Yes.
as we found out.
Yes, I bought it for $2. I was very
And
excited.
all over the place. You can probably find it like on a bootleg YouTube channel, really. Come back and listen to us and hear us prattle on about how awesome it is.
Yeah, definitely. So if you're back now after watching it, Event Horizon is basically a sci-fi horror. It's directed by Paul W.S. Anderson. When he did this, it was Paul Anderson. And written also by Philip Eisner, and starring a couple of big superstars of the sci-fi world. Good old Sam Neill, not Australian, even though we like to claim him as Australian.
Yeah, like all good Australian actors, he's actually from New Zealand.
That's right.
And was born in Ireland.
And Lawrence Fishburne.
Good old Loza.
Yeah, it just like this film came after The Matrix, but it's like
It
you
was
can't.
filmed before The Matrix.
Oh right, no, it was. Sorry, yeah, no, it's the other way around. It's
I watched
1997, isn't
I
it?
watched it after The Matrix.
Yes, I was
because
yeah.
it had Lawrence Fishburne, and that's when it was released in Australia.
That's why I get mixed up.
This is back before the world of streaming, when a movie would be made in America and released in 1997, and then they would withhold it because Titanic was released in 98. And they withheld it, and then Matrix was a hit, and they went, hey, Lawrence Fishburne's also in this one.
Yeah.
We'll release it in Australia.
Yeah, why not? And basically, it's about a spaceship that goes missing. It reappears many years later, and the rescue crew, led by Captain Lawrence Fishburne.
Captain Miller.
That's not his character name, but I just thought, Captain, oh my Captain. And they basically, their mission is to go and, check it out. And Sam Neill was the original creator of the Event Horizon, the name of the ship. And they go and they delve into the pitfalls of this very special ship to find out what went wrong, Surrey. So what was your number one takeaway?
There's simple little phrases that if you say it one way, perfectly innocent. In fact, inviting even, say it another way, not so much.
All about tone, Surrey.
It's all about tone. The example I like to use is, I've got such sights to show you.
Oh, please show me.
Yeah, it's like, here we go. This is a natural waterfall. Look at this double rainbow. It's awesome.
Oh, lovely.
Alternatively, you could say, I have such sights to show you. Yeah, you probably don't want to see those sights.
Yeah, I'd steer my
great.
children away from you very quickly.
They're not the sights you want.
No, they aren't. Fair enough. So it's all about tone, you think, Event Horizon?
Tone. A lot of Event Horizon is tone. For example, if you hear, you can hear this sort of sound, and you're kind of going, oh, that sounds a bit saucy. Now you're throwing a bit of static, some splashes of blood, and
Latin.
And suddenly it doesn't sound quite so interesting.
No, I don't know what porn you're watching. I'm never into the porn with the Latin.
Fun fact, porn actors were actually used to stage that scene.
Of course. It might, you know what, now that you say that, it makes a lot of sense. That makes a lot of sense. I got to watch this on the big screen when it did come out, delayed in Australia. I was quite young, so I got to see it, and it really, I've said this before on Space Brains. If you go back to early episodes, horror was a big part of my teenagehood. So I loved horror, and this was also crossing over to my other love, science fiction. So it kind of like, ticks both boxes.
It's a rare occasion when sci-fi and horror meet.
Yeah.
There's very few films that do it.
That's right.
Genuinely horror.
Yeah.
You get a lot of movies where there might be a jump scare or or similar.
Of course.
But genuine. Yeah, this was I reckon this is basically a mix between Aliens and Hellraiser.
Yeah, and I'm glad you said that because I think, look, Aliens is scary. It is very scary. But, I mean, the horror in this is a bit more on the Hellraiser side. It's like more graphic. Yeah, it's a bit more Clive Barker stuff. Yeah, it's really good stuff. So... Yeah, actually, it's time for you to ask me a question. I'm jumping ahead.
Allow us to look at our notes.
Yes. What do the notes say, Surrey?
Well, okay, so that's my number one takeaway, and we'll just cut out that little bit about the notes.
Okay, we can cut out the notes.
Is this a movie of hope, warning, or is it an experiment?
Warning.
I don't think it's hope, is it?
No, really? It's not hope. There's no hope in this really at all.
This is not portraying science as being a savior or helper at all.
No.
Nor are we trying to figure out what might come from social situations.
Yeah, it's not an experiment. This is an experiment you don't want to do, basically.
This is the one that says, now we know what a gravity drive does. Let's avoid that.
Yes. And I mean, like later when you talk about the science, I mean, I don't know what you're going to talk about particularly, but I mean, when I was watching this again this time round, I thought, wow, this is where why it is a horror, because it fits that genre so well because it's a pure warning, isn't it?
They've got a number of hard sci-fi elements in this. Like
they do.
Like they have the gravity couches in order to withstand the acceleration they're going to undergo.
Yep.
They're talking about an ion drive, which is what you need in order to achieve high levels of speed, not necessarily acceleration, but certainly the throw. And I've spoken about ion drives before. I think maybe way back in Passengers.
Yep.
But they're the things that you need if you want to be traveling at a decent clip. You need an ion drive.
They speak about like the gravity not working inside when they discover Event Horizon. So I mean the science is definitely here, and that's what makes this film that sort of perfect mix. But all horrors have to start they have to be about some sort of warning in a way. There has to be. All horrors, there's always a warning.
They're fairy tales. Yeah, fairy tales of the grim variety, not the Disney variety.
And generally as well, they are, if you go to Blake Schneider, he always says that there has to be a, like people commit a sin or something wrong that then results in the trauma or the horror as as a punishment. Like horrors are a punishment for doing something wrong. So all of those, like if you take Friday the 13th, oh, sorry, let's go have underage sex in the cabin. It's like, and then Jason's going to slice the living daylights out of you while you're having sex because you shouldn't have been having sex. Yeah. So, and if you look at most horrors, it's right. Like most of the time, the main character does something, does something wrong.
And a lot of the science fiction horrors that might be considered sciencey fictiony are usually that, you're going into places you shouldn't go.
Yeah.
You're exploring, so you're talking, I guess even some of your zombie films or your outbreak,
horrors,
virus killing everyone, that sort of thing, clones, and some of the space aliens invading type of deal. They're all that same sort of.
They do cross.
You're probing knowledge that you shouldn't be involved.
Well, remember Predator? They did talk about and we talked a lot about it, but like they talked about the Americans kind of like that boost in the South American rebels, so it was like illegal, non-democratic stuff going on, and this is their punishment, is that this aliens kind of come down. They're getting what they deserve, and that's the same here, that Sam Neill's character, Dr. Weir, is kind of like he's invented something, and I liked that. And did you notice this, that, we had that big moment, and we'll get into the plot in a few moments, but we had that big plot moment where he talks about the science of it, but then later reveals to them once they get to the ship that in fact it was a black hole, where they were talking about traveling faster than the speed of light and all that sort of stuff was the science, but he held back on the idea of a black hole. And that's the bit that really then tells me...
Well, he also held back on the fact not only was it a black hole, but he really didn't know, because they said what's inside, it's complex.
Yeah.
So he's saying, well, it's not complex to say black hole.
Something's messed up, but I don't know.
There was definitely a feeling or a sense that is like, he was using the term black hole almost as like an escape way of saying, because he admitted, I don't really know what's going on in there.
No.
So you get the feeling that basically he has kicked up a hornet's nest here, and he doesn't know what he's really done.
What he's really done. But so that's the sin, isn't it? That's the sin. Like it's not traveling fast and speed of light. It's actually the fact that he's used these wormholes. He's used a black hole to really make it work.
And,
so
and
like, there's a little bit of a there's just straight away there's deception there.
And he sent a crew of people on the ship, possibly without telling them what exactly was going on.
And this crew was coming without really knowing the truth. So there's a lot of, that's what I mean. There's Weir's character, and that's all it takes. It just takes one person, and because he's got the power position anyway. It just takes one person doing all the wrong things. You know, that's the sin that's going on. So to me, it's like warning. If we're going to, in one day, Surrey, we've talked a lot about the science of this show. We're going to send people faster than the speed of light. We're going to use wormholes or something like that. People were being concerned
about the Large Hadron Collider.
What are we going to bring back? We're going to bring back some pure evil.
Had the possibility of creating singularities.
Yeah.
They'd be very, very small, short-lived.
Mm.
But there was people were concerned, not physicists, concerned that they could switch on the Large Hadron Collider and end the world.
Yeah.
So that's a horror just waiting to happen right there.
It is.
There's your next horror movie, Hollywood.
There we go. Copyright Space Brains 2020.
Yeah, you heard it from us first.
We want to option it. Okay. What have you been up to in the world of
Well, I've been vomiting on social media.
Yes, you have.
I've been attempting to provide genuine value to social media.
Yeah.
I've also noticed that the original Star Trek series is now on Netflix with Captain Kirk and so on. And I'm curious. It's been quite a few years since I've really watched any of that.
Yeah.
And so they've also got Next Generation on. I'm kind of considering checking out a couple of those episodes.
Yeah, I think you should.
There's a couple of sort of famous ones that I might rewatch.
There's a little show I just stumbled across. It's new to HBO called Avenue 5, I think. Avenue 5? Is that right? I think that's right. So it's about a ship, and it's a drama, comedy, sci-fi.
Yes, this is that one.
It's got the dude, Hugh, is it Hugh Laurie House?
Yes,
you know, the guy that played House, the British actor. And a suite of American very funny comedians that have been in shows like The Office and Parks and Recs and stuff. And but basically, there's 2 episodes so far that are available, and very funny sci-fi.
Yeah,
very funny.
I've seen the ads for that. That's the one about the big spaceship.
It's a cruise ship, and it's gone off tangent because of a yoga class.
Yeah, small deviation in its navigation.
And they don't realise that then now the ship is going to take like an extra 5 years to get back to Earth, and they're all a bit like the trajectory.
The boss is on board, and he's like almost like a parody of a Silicon Valley tech bro.
Well, they even joke like Elon Musk, you know, like Tesla kind of gets joked a lot. But it's good. I've watched 2 episodes, very funny. What I found a bit funny about it as well was when that trajectory stuff was happening, like no one really understood it, and the engineer was trying to explain it, and no one was like, but what if we just nudge the ship back the other way and stuff like that? So, and they had like NASA and all these people like back on Earth calculating, going, no. So there's some funny sort of actual science.
The number of times in my own job as a software engineer you've got to explain to the business why one solution that seems so similar to the other one is close to impossible to do given budgets and timelines. And the other one is actually really easy to do. And it can be difficult trying to come up with the nuances.
Yeah.
There.
So that's a new one. Because you said Rick and Morty, I've tuned into that because that is available on Netflix. And I mean, if you're a sci-fi fan, I think you should be watching that. I mean, it does feel, I'm new to it. Okay, I'm new to it, and there's 4 seasons. I've watched a few episodes in a row. It does really feel like it's Doc and Marty, doesn't it? Like from Back to the Future. And I know you mentioned that maybe the original episode on YouTube was that. The original. There's a bit of a pun of that or whatever.
Yeah.
But I really, because he's just constantly going Morty, you know. But once you
and his scientific explanation is just ludicrous.
Yeah.
He'll say, "Oh, well, of course it's a something or other."
Yeah.
And I just,
you want me to make something for you to make your life easier, do you? Yeah, it's funny, but I like. It feels like you could imagine, like you and I sitting here and going, "We love Back to the Future," which we do, and just kind of going, "Imagine if we took those characters and just made them like extreme versions of that," you know, like So you really take the Doc, because then Rick and Morty's like alcoholic, and he's older and he's crazier, and so it's like, what if you just sort of really push that envelope to another realm, that's pretty much what it is. So it's hilarious. I really enjoy it. So you should be watching that. So there's 2 sci-fi shows I think people should be watching, and you're suggesting the Star Trek going back.
There's a couple of famous episodes there. There's one I think either written or co-written by William Gibson or someone or other famous. There's a couple of good ones in there that need to be explored.
Definitely. And it says a lot, like it leads you down that path of, what a lot of this homage in other shows can be.
Well, the interesting thing is also some of the tech that they were using on Star Trek, like their communicators, are like flip phones. Yeah, and their way of transmitting data or interfacing with the computer was like a little block, which you could say it was very much like a 3.5-inch floppy disk, which of course nowadays is quite defunct. But go back in 1967, and such a thing did not even think of existing. So that was quite good, and they had the little tablet computer type things that they'd use, voice interaction, quite a lot of stuff that has come to reality, really.
So it always makes me think, and it leads into Lawrence Fishburne, but in the Matrix of those flip phones, whoosh. Yeah, that phone looks like if you watch the Matrix now, you can't help but kind of laugh at the phone. But then the cleverness of it is, if you really take that film on, well, they do tell us that the story, the Matrix, is stuck. It's built for 1999. So it's almost like, well, that's the excuse. It'd be like saying, going back to like a movie set in 1890 and saying, well, there's no cars, well, there was no cars, like in mass production. So it's kind of like, well, yeah, that's what the phones were like in 1999, kids. Believe it or not.
And if you haven't seen The Matrix, you need to.
Yeah, just to see the phones, the Nokia.
And you need to remember what year it was made, because so much has been built off the technology they developed, but also the tropes they introduced and the ways of their the cinematography that the Wachowskis brought into it. Yeah. That I fear that people watching, a modern person now, say a 20-year-old who would have been only just born when the Matrix was coming out, goes and watches The Matrix, and then might go, oh, geez, what a rip-off of this, and what, it's yet another one of those action sequences. You go, no, you have to understand, this was the first.
Yeah, this is the big first commercial version of this.
First use of bringing that. Look, anyway, we're talking about a different movie tonight.
Yeah, and that will be another. We do need to do that as a classic. We will
maybe
do that.
Episode 30.
Maybe that will be our next classic. So our classic is Event Horizon, 1997, from the United States. Now, look, directed by Paul W.S. Anderson. He has gone on and made a bucket load of sci-fi horrors.
Especially
he's made
Resident
the
Evil.
Resident Evil series all the way through. He's
he
even married.
He's
He's her third husband. Oh, how's that?
She goes through them, eh?
She has. Well, her first one, she married one of the co-actors of Dazed and Confused, and they were like 16. They actually got annulled very quickly.
Oh, okay.
So I don't know if that one really counts.
I don't know. That's a practice.
Yeah, that's a practice. But then she married a major screenwriter director as well from Hollywood. And that lasted a couple of years. But with him, they've been together a long time. They've had a few kids and blah, blah, blah. But yeah, they've been a bit of a working force, haven't they, in the sci-fi horror?
Yeah, they got
obviously
that,
together.
I reckon there's about $1 billion of revenue from the Resident Evil movies.
It's the same with, and I'm not going to get his name, but Kate Beckinsale, that's her name, isn't it? The Australian actress. The Underworld. The director of that, they're married.
Yeah.
And he's made all of those films. So it's a similar kind of partnership.
It would make things a lot easier working together, because one of the problems I see with Hollywood celebrity couples is, when do they get to see each other? if they're off making movies all the time or attending gala events and junkets and whatever else.
If they're doing it all for the one movie, well, then they're basically just hanging out all the time, aren't they? Make a lot of sense.
Doing something they enjoy doing.
Yeah. So anyway, so that's good old Anderson. For some reason, I don't know if you found out why he's added those initials in. I'm not too sure, but he started off. Now this is a little tidbit. He'd made some cool stuff in Britain. All right, he's a British filmmaker, and the Americans noticed him, and he was offered Mortal Kombat. And he did Mortal Kombat, and it was a huge blockbuster.
Despite it being a dreadful film.
We won't get into that. Jean-Claude Van Damme and Kylie Minogue, and what's his name, who died from the Atoms.
No, that's Street Fighter, is that one you're thinking of? No, Mortal Kombat was...
it is, isn't it? Jeez, I'm having a real clasher.
Conor McLeod from the
man, I've really clashed those over in my brain.
What's his name? Yes. Sort of French actor fellow. He played Raiden in the Mortal Kombat.
He did, didn't he? Oh God, no.
No, but Street Fighter did quite well as well. That was in a sort of a campy sort of way.
Neither of them very good movies.
No, but I have a feeling they appealed more to.
I was a teenage boy at the time. I was the audience of those movies.
Yeah, I think they appealed to the people who liked the games.
I liked the games.
Yeah, okay.
But anyway, they just didn't. I enjoyed them, but they weren't.
The numbers don't lie. No. A lot of people found them quite good,
and that's all anyone cares. But anyway, what I wanted to say was the tidbit here is so he made he was building a huge career. He made some really successful small films, etc. He made himself known in Britain. He was offered Mortal Kombat. It was a huge blockbuster. And then he was basically given a plethora of scripts to pick from, including some films that were eventually made by other people that became blockbusters. And yet he decided to kind of say, nah, I'm going to go make an R-rated sci-fi horror. And that was Event Horizon. And it didn't do very well, did it, at the movies? It kind of bombed. But luckily, as the years went on, it became a real sort of niche market, of what we call a cult classic, Surrey. The one that lasts.
Well, that's one of the things it did. It cost $60 million to make. So it was not a cheap film.
No, they threw money at this.
This is 1997 film.
Yep,
spending $60 million on an R-rated horror.
Yeah.
That's like...
Sci-fi horror.
Yeah, that's sort of usually box office poison.
Yeah.
And yeah, sure enough, it made $27 million or something. So it
bombed. That's a real bomb.
Less than half. And because we've covered other movies here where they have been claimed to bomb and they've made back more than that they...
Yeah, they made well...
$120 million and they only made, $180 million. You sort of go, well, yeah, that's not a real... Because that was that After Earth with Will Smith.
Yeah, that's right.
I think they're expecting with the star power that they're going to get a whole lot more.
Yeah, $1 billion.
But
and we've talked about that.
So this one here, less than half the money in box office, but it's an R-rated horror. You got to expect almost no one sees R-rated horrors in cinemas because the people who want to go to cinemas to watch horror movies are sort of 15 to 16, 17-year-olds. And if the cinemas are kicking them out because they're not 18, the 18-year-olds, you'll get some, but certainly any of the larger adults, older adults just not going to do it.
Yeah, and you can't, adult men can't necessarily, it's not a date movie, so you can't really take,
No.
I mean, there'd be a few, but majority, you know what I mean?
My wife's not going to be into it.
It's not going to get, the whole date night moving well. She's watched it,
but she kind of was a fairly,
a
bit ambivalent about it.
But you can understand. So then you're down to kind of the crazy, people our age, middle-aged men going and sitting in the back of the movie theater.
Let's not discount the middle-aged nerdy women.
No. But the people that are willing to go out and pay money to do that on their own, it's only going to be a few. It is.
Yeah.
A few thousand, but you're talking about thousands of dollars.
But when this fella hit the DVD or video,
it sort of built an audience.
And the DVD, I think I watched it on VHS.
Yeah, should have.
Or DVD. One of the
Maybe DVD.
I
might have been one of those when DVD first came out and it was really schmicko and, started to revolutionise the way home entertainment was shown without the graininess.
Yeah, I never
VHS.
noticed the grains of VHS until I got DVD. And then I went back to try and watch Galaxy Quest. I had a VHS of Galaxy Quest. I thought, Galaxy Quest is a good
Couldn't
one.
watch it.
And it was just like half tuned in. It was just, it was appalling. I just going, chuck those tapes out now.
So, anyway, it built a big audience to the point that they thought, let's do a director's cut. And they went to do a director's cut. And this is a crazy thing. I mean, I don't even understand this happens with such a big film. But a lot of the original film had been destroyed.
Well,
weird.
Paul Lowe originally put together a very quick cut, about 2 hour long movie. And he agreed. He went, no, that's too long. And the test audiences said, yeah, too long and way too gory. Far more disturbing than what we're interested in.
I'd like to see that.
Which is funny because since then we've had movies like Saw and Hostel, which are renowned for being quite stomach turning. So, and he agreed, no, that's okay. But the 1 hour 30 that came out, he said was too short.
Yeah.
There was 10 minutes of footage he really wanted to put back in there, but they said, no, we have to go with this because Titanic's coming out in a couple of months.
It goes for 3 hours.
We do not want to put an R-rated horror up against Titanic.
No.
And we need a hit.
Wasn't a hit.
It wasn't a hit that they wanted, which is a real shame. And I'm glad Paul went on and got to do other movies.
Yeah.
I'm glad this didn't like tank him or anything crazy like that. But yeah, so that 10-minute extra, it was just, it got lost because this is back in 97 where footage was actual celluloid film. And it gets recycled and chucked out. Like the number of reels they must have in Hollywood studios would just be outrageous. The best thing was, I think his buddy, the scriptwriter, had a VHS of the original cut. But yeah, as we just said, VHS is like bad quality. And it was the original cut, which was not a good film. So there's just, it wasn't
it just seems crazy, but for me, from my point of view of editing short films and stuff myself, that like you keep everything, and I get Hollywood would probably have warehouses of it, but like you just think that by 1990s they would just be like, we just keep it. Like you just don't know. Like if they were banking on also being like a hit, unless that's the thing, unless after it was a bomb, they kind of went,
this is that curious time before the DVD, re-release director's cut thing was
and
like
all
a
the
big
extras
deal.
on DVDs and stuff.
That was sort of a couple of years later, like around that turn of 2000-ish. That's
very
when
true. That's when that happened.
That's when we got all those bonus features and those re-releases and all the rest of it. And I reckon now no one would be making a feature-length film and chucking anything out.
No, well now digital, it's just digital storage anyway, isn't it? So it's a lot cheaper.
A thumb drive can keep all your cutscenes, no worries.
Anyway, so that's a little bit about the backstory. So it's good that it's built a cult classic. And I've got to say, sitting down, watching this again, Surrey, I was not disappointed. How about you?
When I first watched it, when I was a youngster, a good 20 years ago or so.
Yeah.
I don't think I appreciated it quite as well. I remember it being good, and I remember we were very pleased with watching it. My friends and I, we're into like the Hellraisers. Yeah. We're into some of the slasher films as well. But certainly a lot of Clive Barker stuff.
Yeah.
Which, geez, I can't even remember. I couldn't even name some of these movies he's done. We love that sort of weird,
sheer
hell dimension, evil stuff going on. Yeah, the Candyman. So all these sorts of things. So we watched a lot of that, and so watching it again this time, I was able to, first of all, pick up more of the story, but also really appreciate the effort that went into the sets and the design and some of the storytelling elements. It was,
definitely.
It's not a surprise that it's a cult hit when you look at it. You can see a couple of shots at a couple of special effects where you kind of go, that looks like it was a bit rushed, or it was kind of, not as finessed as what it could have been. But for the most part, there was some really beautiful moments.
Yeah, I think the thing, I seem to remember that, I mean, probably a little bit like you're saying, that this film, I saw it at the cinemas, and I remember being really amped up about it, but maybe walking away at the time a little bit underwhelmed by it, and I can't. This time watching it, I don't really know why, because I watched it this time and went, far out. This is quite a damn good film. There's so much to really like about it on so many different levels. Like
a lot of
the
horror
story,
films that just don't get there.
There's a lot of references, and I mean, maybe that's when I watched it at the time, I was probably a late teenager. I might not have gotten some of the references that this film actually has in it. Whereas this time I was like, oh my God, there's Kubrick. Oh, there's, Clive Barker. Oh, there is sheer horror. Oh, they're playing off that kind of poetry of
Alien
art.
there for sure.
Yeah, there's Alien in there. So there was a lot that maybe I didn't go, oh, ding, 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 whereas I went to watch it and I don't know what I was expecting. Maybe I was expecting something different. But I've got to say, like, if you watch this film with an open eye and really just take it in, it will really deliver, I think. And I mean, on its essence, I'm glad that this cut is so sharp, because one thing I've found in this story was it didn't slow down. Like, it is wham bam the whole way through, really. Like, there's a couple of breaths. Like, there's a scene where Lawrence Fishburne, he tells his past story about leaving the man and the fire. But there's only a couple of scenes like that in this whole story that you have a moment to breathe. Whereas the rest is like, bam, bam. The ship is just delivering nightmare after nightmare upon this crew. There's not really a moment where you breathe. Again, Blake Schneider talks about, up and down in storytelling, as in, like, the audience needs a breath. This film doesn't really do that. Like, it's just like, the whole way, like.
By the time you get to that point where they're down in the end of the ship and they're pulling out the carbon dioxide scrubbers, and there's no good, chuck it. This one, yep, go, chuck it. No, we need 25. Bang, bang, bang. And, like, the music has got that strings sort of psycho type intensity. You're just going, just bloody go. You don't have time.
I know.
Yeah, the whole thing, it's crazy. So let's quickly, I think we're going to push through this plot
quickly.
So we open up with a bit of some title cards, give us a bit of history.
Yeah.
I'm still a fan of less of these.
Yes, I am too.
Because I'm wondering, because I thought, and every time I get a voiceover or one of these little descriptors, I think it was like, okay, I'm going to note to see if any of that was of any value in the film. And I was watching going, maybe a little bit of a mention about the event horizon, but if one of the characters had just sort of said something a bit about the event horizon, I could have cut it. But anyway, nonetheless, so it starts off with, colony on the moon. I see you've got a little list here. We've got 2015, apparently, we're going to have a colony on the moon.
Yeah.
That's pretty sweet. Commercial mining on Mars.
Yeah, 2035.
2040, the event horizon goes off to Neptune and disappears.
Yeah.
And 2047.
Well, it's now. That was the text. I quite liked that. So I think that was Anderson having a little play on the fact of that text.
Yeah.
But I do wonder again, like, did we really need to know any of that?
I particularly, it's an R-rated film, so adults are going to see this. You'd hope that most adults now have enough wherewithal to be able to figure this out of the plot.
But in the 90s, that was a bit of a thing as well. If you remember in the 90s, a lot of, especially big Hollywood action films and stuff, I know that there was quite a few films that open with a bit of that text. Yeah. Like, they I don't know, it was a thing in the 90s. It was almost like they were like, okay, the story starts now.
So,
so maybe there was a bit of a trend.
Yeah, I think so. So we make a slow zoom in on a spaceship, which is, it's got this big front head and a very skinny neck.
There was, sorry to cut you off, there was a big, like before any of those numbers, there was a really big opening sequence of credits, because that was another thing they did in the 90s, wasn't it?
And the music.
There was that techno music.
How cool was that music?
I know.
I don't remember that at all.
No.
I'm listening to music going...
It's
like this sort of 90s dark electro.
It was.
Sort of...
It was hardcore.
Orchestral synth. It was fantastic.
And the Matrix does it. Sorry, we keep going back to the Matrix. The Matrix does it. It's like the music in the Matrix, and this is in the 90s. Is like the music was really important. Like they really like this was like I felt like you're in like a goth nightclub here with this sort of music. Like it was like that 90s goth. That that synth, and that was heavy, and it's just those credits are thrown at you, like this is what they did in the 90s. Yeah. They threw credits at you. I'm thinking about some big action movies like The Rock and, Con Air and stuff where it's like, don't. It's like there's 5 minutes of 5 minutes of credits, you know what I mean? Before the movie starts. Like, get your popcorn, sit down, get ready. And so I think the opening text does, I'm not a huge fan of it myself, but yeah, they do it. So after we have that text, a ship appears, this giant ship appears. In space, and we go into it, and we inside the ship, and basically it's obviously got no gravity. Things are floating around like watches, and I think there might be a can of Coke or something. Yeah,
there was an empty soft drink.
Those kind of things. Cup, yeah. And then we have a dead man floating, and we sort of like he's spinning around, and then we kind of go in on it, and he screams.
Yeah, and we go down his throat.
Yeah, we go down.
And get to black.
Yeah, it goes to black.
And waking up is Dr. Weir.
Dr. Weir, Sam Neill.
Sam Neill character. Yeah. He wakes up and he goes, "Oh, geez, what a terrible dream."
And he kind of
grabs his photograph.
Yeah. Starts holding this photo of a woman.
Says her name. I can't remember her name. Claire. I miss you. And he gets up and puts it with like a little a Claire shrine.
Yeah, he does. He has many photos of Claire.
And I love this scene here where he's shaving.
Yeah.
Just right at the start, because I think I probably missed this when I was watching it younger. And I'm watching it, and he's sort of shaves, and he moves the blade in close, and he stops. And he takes a breath, and he looks back like at the bathtub.
Yeah.
And then his hand kind of moves in, almost like it's pushing a bit too hard.
Yeah.
And then he just continues shaving.
And because it's a proper razor.
Yeah, it's a straight razor.
It's a straight razor, yeah.
And the only time you introduce a straight razor into a film,
someone's going to slit their throat.
is to indicate that maybe this is like a kind of a Chekhov's gun, really.
Well, it is. It is. Yeah. It totally is. Like in movies, you never see, unless it's comedy, but you don't see them with that unless it is about slitting the throat.
Yeah. And so, I thought that was a great start. Straight off the bat, I'm going, there's tension here.
Yeah.
Is he considering suicide? Is he traumatized by this? Like,
great writing,
and
because
it's like Claire was mentioned.
Who is this Claire?
Going, okay.
Yeah. Who is this Claire? What is it? And then, so the other thing is, in the context of that, you don't really know where he is. He's in some tight a tight space.
Futuristic space.
Futuristic space. But then he kind of, after shaving, he's at this window, and the camera does a complete
Kubrick upside down business. Yeah.
Starts spinning around and around, because that's what his ship would be doing, I suppose. And it really is a bit disorientated. And in fact, he's on this massive frame of a ship thing, isn't it?
Space station thing.
And I think it writes up space station, daylight station. Yeah, that's right. And it's above Earth, so he's above Earth. He's an
above
astronaut.
the Arabian Peninsula, I think.
Yeah.
If I recognise my geography.
Oh well, there you go. I think they wrote that text up, so that's what I picked up. And then we cut to another ship, and it does write up some text telling us that this is a Lewis and Clark. Famous explorers. Famous explorers, and it's a search and rescue.
Actually, what did Lewis and Clark do in the way of searching? Did they eat each other? Surely you wouldn't name a spaceship after a couple that killed each other and ate each other.
We might have to Google that. Sorry, I don't know.
Keep talking about Lewis.
I will keep going through the plot about Lewis and Clark. You Google that. So this search and rescue ship that appears is a Lewis and Clark rescue vessel, and the crew. We come in on the crew, and they're hardworking. They know what they're doing. They don't know why they're on this particular mission. They question the captain. Oh, captain, my captain. And the captain turns around in his special swivel chair. Did you notice that swivel chair this time?
It was very noisy.
It was... It was so unnecessary. But it was also so unnecessary. Did you see when they all got up to go off? It took him about an extra minute to turn
okay,
in.
guys.
Okay, guys. They also just went off, and he's like... I had to laugh at that.
I'm not sure what benefit he gained from sitting in that.
No, but at the time it looked cool because it's a hovering chair.
Well, he could sort of move over to anyone's station.
That's right.
Yeah, and I guess the idea is that he's got a seatbelt. So if they're, when they're coming in close to Neptune, it was a lot of turbulence there. So he'd be able to go in and
he'd be able to hand out. Yeah, he was a proper captain, so But his ship was pretty funny. And this is Lawrence Fishburne, the captain. Which is Captain Miller.
Okay, Lewis and Clark, they did like the cross-country tour of the United States.
Right.
They were successful.
Right. There you go. I thought so.
Like a bit like Burke and Wells here in Australia.
Yes, they're that
they
version.
They died in the desert.
They did. But their story is quite interesting. We're not going to go into it right now. They have a bit of a more interesting tale than people know about. But so Lewis and Clark, we know that they're famous explorers. And so this crew don't really know what's going on. They've been ordered.
Top secret
mission. They don't know. And so they go down to talk to their special what's his name? Weir, yeah.
The specialist,
on board, who they don't know. He's not part of them. They've picked him up. He's part of this mission. And he tries to talk to Lawrence Fisher, Captain Miller, about what they're kind of going to do. But he's saying, no, the idea here is that you will... Oh, that's right. He has like a standoff with the captain.
Mm.
And before he's going to go into his, hypersleep sort of station, because he's not very comfortable about that, is he, Weir?
No, he was not comfortable about being honest. He keeps saying, if I could just take a few moments of your valuable time. And like, no, you can't.
No, you can't.
Get going.
Yes. And it was interesting because they said to Weir, the chamber, if you don't get in the chamber, the force, and I thought you would like this.
30 Gs.
The 30 G force of the ship would liquefy your body. That's the line in the movie. That's the explanation. And I was like, tasty. That is interesting. But it's cool, isn't it? Because they go into these little tubs. It's like they're like underwater. They got the snorkel and the mask kind of all turned up. They're in little underwear, little bathers.
Remind me of the scene in Empire Strikes Back where Luke is in the healing tank with a little mask on.
Yeah. It's a different type of hypersleep, isn't it? It's like you're in water. And like they play off that because they get trapped in it, they wake up in it, and that's always really spooky, isn't it? Like opening your eyes, you're in water, are you trapped in there? And they play off that later in the film. And so it's this watery solution. And basically that's what actually happens next in the next scene is that it goes to 56 days out. So they've been traveling for 56 days. They're all been asleep in these little chambers. And Weir wakes up and he kind of like, opens up his thing and the water pulls out. Everyone else is still asleep. And he kind of wanders the ship a little bit and he finds Claire.
Yeah.
A woman.
A woman is sitting
naked.
In the bridge.
She's sitting on the bridge. She's in the captain's chair. And she, she's, disorientates him. And then when he actually gets to see her up close, she's got no eyes.
No eyes, but she looks right at him.
Yeah. And so he awakens for real this time. And they're all actually now awake. He's the last one waking up from his hypersleep. And I liked that there was a line here because there is some good... Cooper. Played by Richard T. Jones, which I know he's been in a whole bunch of stuff.
And thankfully an easy name to pronounce.
I know. We can actually get that right. Richard Jones, you're out there. Hit us up. But he says a great line here. He says he's offering everyone coffee and then he goes, would you like something hot and black inside you?
Yeah, I was like, gee, that's a bit sexual harassment-y.
It's so not. It would not be done.
Apparently, though, some of the footage that got cut was an exploration of the relationship of Stark and Cooper and things.
Yeah.
So I get the feeling that maybe we sort of saw that
they
had sort of a bit of a relationship. It wasn't just this because when he said that too, in my mind I'm going, that's not cool. That's quite hostile to try and live and work in that arrangement for you're trapped on a ship with some dude who's
sexually harassing you the whole time.
Pushing himself on you but this is the
90s. Where's the HR department of this search and rescue group because that's sexual harassment.
The captain just walks up and says get going, do you mind if I put some clothes on? Actually I do mind, just get going. He was very impatient at the start of the film.
I did think again it's the 90s, and they said, they did a bit of this, didn't they? There was a fair bit of sexual discrimination in a lot of these movies.
Yes.
Yeah. So it kind of still works for me. It's not appropriate in 2020. You would not see this.
It's helpful that we're men, so it's sort of,
Yeah, that's right. Anyway, then they all gather up. They do a very post-wake up alien scene, don't they? They're like in the kitchen.
Exactly the
they're
same.
like got food.
Even the setting and the scenery and the
lighting,
inside of the ship, the white paneling and everything. It's just, I was actually thinking to myself, did they actually borrow some of the sets from Alien?
I think it's just pure homage because look, we all love Alien, and I imagine these guys would
coveralls,
love it. Yeah, and they're half some of them are half dressed, which is the same as Alien, and they were eating, and they're unhappy. They're unhappy at Weir, which is similar to Alien. If you remember the two crew members are unhappy about their pay.
Brett and I don't know anything.
No, I don't know off the top of my head either. But they're unhappy, and so they're like, "Come on, tell us the truth. What are we doing out here? Why are we so far? We've never been out this far before."
Because we learned that poor old woman whose name I don't know, she missed out on seeing her little boy.
Yeah.
Because and she's it's.
Yeah, I know
it's okay. My ex-husband will have him for Christmas.
Peters, right? Peters.
Yeah, and I'll get him for summer. It's okay. And you go, it's clearly not okay.
No, it's not okay.
That is about as not okay. I mean, it is kind of fair, really, is that you'll get the summer break and she, it's actually
Surrey,
the long one. But
again, I think we need to call this something because you and I have talked about this previously off air. We really talked about it with Predator. Alien did it well. This film does it well again. You have a crew of weird people. Yes. You have the sexually discrimination guy, Cooper. And, you have Stark, who, probably really should be a captain. She's smart. You have so-and-so who's, missing her son's Christmas or whatever it is.
Birthday,
whatever
There's some sort of a celebration going on.
There's these little, testy things going on between each crew members, but it's not hi, I'm a scientist. Hi, I'm a biologist. Oh, hi, I'm a detonator explorer. I'm a billionaire. They again in this, and I think it worked in this because they just went really fast over it. There was not much into it. You know what I mean? I think it worked because it was just within a minute they introduced all those characters and then they just moved on. They didn't linger on it. We got a bit of a taste of some of those interactions, like you said, with Cooper and Stark, and then also Peters, and DJ was just sort of a bit quiet and weird. Yeah, he's a bit weird.
And he introduced himself as DJ.
And Justin...
what do you do? Trauma.
Justin seemed to really know what he was doing, even though he was young, and you know what I mean? He was kind of I don't know what he did on the ship, but he did fly in something, but on the bridge
he seemed to be a bit of an engineering type.
Yeah, engineering type.
Because he went down to the gravity drive.
Yeah, he did. They all sort of knew what they were doing quite well. And that's why I wrote down, my description was they're a hard-working crew. They all seem to be doing stuff.
And they've done things together in the past.
So this film, again, that's what I mean, we should maybe come up with a little radar of that, for Space Brains maybe, because this is a good one,
the group intro,
you
rate it out of 5 stars.
Rate that bit out of 5 stars because this was good. Anyway, so they're unhappy and they take it up with Weir, and he starts explaining the event horizon. And it's kind of one of those things he starts talking sciencey, a bit like you do.
In layman's terms.
And they're like, layman's terms, dude. I sexually harass people. Come on, you got to dumb it down.
You talk English?
Except you got to dumb it down, man.
I was thinking to myself, though, except no one would be allowed on that spaceship without a doctorate.
I know.
They would all be, the engineer, he'd be going, oh, yeah, gravitons. Oh, that's a novel way of doing it.
Yeah, that's interesting, man. No one's ever thought about that before. Okay. No, why didn't we know about it?
It's the shortest distance between points. What? You talking about wormholes?
No, I've got to get down a picture off the wall of a naked woman and pierce a pencil through her vagina and her head to show you, to demonstrate what's going on here.
I've seen that movie.
I know. I have too.
It's called Event Horizon.
It's called Event Horizon. So he tells them, and this is what I meant, here he's sort of revealing the science of it, but not telling them about the black hole, which is cool, I reckon. So it's he's holding back. And that's what it felt like, didn't it? It felt like he was telling them stuff.
He was trying to baffle them with a bit of science.
Yeah. He was holding back, which is cool. So he demonstrates with the Playboy model or naked chick or whatever that if you fold it space and time and go through it, that's what the event horizon. He then right at the end reveals why is he so interested in it? He built it. And then they play this scene you're telling me about that people sort of pretended to have sex. They play this scary sound, don't they, at the end of the scene?
Yeah, the one
it's a really
transmission.
creepy fucking sound.
Screams and static, and then a little bit of voice, and the guy says, "Oh, that's Latin."
Yeah.
And he says, "Oh, that's libera me," so save me.
Yeah.
And
Great
okay.
horror, really. Like, oh, we're going somewhere where we've just gotten a message from them which says "save me,"
and it sounds like a lot of screaming.
Sounds like a lot of screaming. I'm not too sure if you want to be going in there, man. But anyway, and then this is what I mean about the plot moving really fast, because it goes from that, and then even when they bring the ship, suddenly the ship's got turbulence, doesn't it?
Yeah,
like
they're
it's all
Neptune.
cloudy.
Well, that's
Boom, 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 boom.
Neptune's near orbit.
I love that, because it's like, how can we, it's not just a boring, here we come up on this ship. It's like, oh God, like we might not even survive this turbulence. The Lewis and Clark is not built for this kind.
It's increasing a bit of the tension there, and it's making the discovery of the event horizon violent, sudden, and it almost appears like, oh, thank goodness we found it.
Yeah.
But then they start going inside of it, because that's what happens. That this turbulence, and it's coming up closer and closer.
They go through this cloud, and then there it is.
And
it's huge as well.
Slam on the brakes,
huge,
and this. They do a bit of a fly around, and you
do a bit of
explains.
scan.
Yeah, that's the crew bit and the engineering, and there's a main airlock halfway along. They hook onto, they grab hold, they clamp onto the aerials. That's not a load bearing structure. Crunch! It is now.
Yeah.
You're like,
and Stark is, I mean, again, this is the thing, everything's moving really fast. Like Stark's like, there's no radiation, but it's only really minor, so we should be okay. And then that's when she says there's life signs, but it's weird. It's they're moving very minimal, but they're moving all up and down the ship.
Yeah, it's scattered all over the ship.
Which is a little bit of a clue about the whole thing.
And then they're trying to say, oh, maybe it's interference, or is that? And she says, well, no, I don't think so.
Yeah.
But
Stark,
I mean, they're going, well, they've never seen anything like this. So they put out their umbilicus. I thought of Alien there.
Yeah.
That thing coming out, it had that organic, ribbed look. It looked like it was, and even the front of the Lewis and Clark had that smooth back, shaped like the alien head. It looked like an alien head with its little.
It did.
Proboscis.
It would be interesting if good old Anderson could get online and tell us about that.
I'll hook up
was that his intention?
Good old Paul William Scott Anderson. And ask him about that.
Oh, his full name, definitely.
Oh, well, yeah, but that's because we're on full name
You're
basis. He calls me Surrey John Hughes.
So they decide that, well, they're not getting these proper readings. They need to enter the ship. And the Captain Miller is going to go on board. Stark's going to go on board. And
Weir has to stay behind.
Weir wants to go, but he's like, no, you don't have to go in. You're going to be here to tell us what's going on. Justin's also going to come on board. So kind of like very minimal, like a couple of them are going to go on to sort of like check it out, which makes a lot of sense. And they go in and there's things floating around. And there is one of those great jump scares on Miller, which is like a glove comes over his hand.
He's in the medical bay.
Yeah.
He's just doing a life scan. There's nothing in here. It's not.
Yeah. And this glove comes over, and the way it's shot, it just kind of, so we don't see. It's like there's a hand coming around his face, isn't there?
Yeah,
and then he like freaks out. Yeah, it would freak out because again, you're blinded, aren't you, in the suit? So they kind of like the hand comes.
And it'd be so quiet.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because everyone's floating. There's no sort of footsteps or anything like that.
Yeah. And is it Stark? She discovers blood in the bridge, I think.
And then the light flashes. Light flashes. And
it's like there's this blood split and growing. It looks like it's growing, doesn't it?
Like gore. It's not nice.
No. I mean, that's very Alien, isn't it, as well? Like, because it looks like it's growing. It's blood that's growing and
not nice.
It's not at all.
And then old Justin, he heads on down into the engineering section.
Yeah.
And this, I'm just going to jump straight forward to one of my favourite scenes. This is going to be a favourite scene here.
Yeah.
Where he comes down. So far the ship it's been a bit industrial, a bit, like I said.
Yeah.
Like the Alien ships that they had on there, like the Sulaco and so forth. It had that same sort of feel of being a fairly utilitarian. There's sort of what you'd expect. Yeah. This hallway down the middle had a distinct feeling of like a very phallic or a throat or something. But he gets down the bottom and he opens these doors, and we're stepping into a whole nother world of horror, because the doors open up and there's a rotating corridor.
Yeah.
And he says, what the hell's that? He says, oh, that's to maintain,
The
so you don't
magnetic
disrupt
field.
the magnetic field.
Yeah.
And he says, yeah, it looks like a meat grinder.
Yeah.
And it does. It looks like a grater and a meat grinder.
Constantly twirling.
Spinning around. And you're just looking at that going, surely someone's going to fly into that and get ground into pulp.
And you know what it's like? It's like the old House of Horrors.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Like the old sort of like walking down a ghost train ride that you might get at an amusement park, or House of Horrors kind of thing where you walk. I remember as a kid walking down one of those things where it's like, it's all mirrors.
Yeah.
Or the mirrors are spinning around like that.
Yeah, it's
and
like
so
it's a twirling
around you, and you walk down a straight corridor, but because it's twirling around you, it's very disorientating.
And then the doors at the end of that open.
Yeah.
And they're not just like the other doors, that they form what looks like the biohazard symbol.
They do, yeah.
And when they open, they've got spikes on them.
Yeah.
Like, you're going, spikes. It looks like a mouth.
Yeah,
or something
opening.
horror, and stepping into that room with the core.
The big core.
And it's all fractal spikes in sort of a rust red, gunmetal grey sort of arrangement with this
Big
twirling thing in the middle, which again has got this fractal spike sort of arrangements on it.
And there's spikes all around it as well in the room.
Spikes,
which is weird.
The whole room, it looks like a horror setting.
It does.
It really does. But at the
and
same,
this ball starts like illuminating, doesn't it?
yeah,
and spinning.
It's got the three rings around it.
Yeah.
And the three rings that just have nice, clear white lights.
Yeah.
Shining out in contrast to the whole rest of the room, which is just all these weird metallic shadows and spikes and gratery looking things. And that whole scene, like, if that doesn't set you on edge, then nothing will, because
there is. It's weird. It's totally bizarre. And then he relays back. There's coolant everywhere. There's like floating coolant, and he's like touches a bubble. Very 90s special effects, like touching a bubble in the air and
that's
it like
from
moist.
Yeah, you can thank Terminator 2 for that technology.
And
that's another move we're gonna have to do.
Yeah. So we cut from that, and Stark. Is it Stark? It's Stark, isn't it?
Yeah, she's up on the bridge.
So she, we said that, sorry, before. And she discovers in this moment that there's a dead body, which kind of freaks her out at first. Then she examines it, and his eyes are clawed out or popped out.
His flesh is torn.
Yeah, his flesh is torn, and he's just floating there.
One of these guys makes a comment that it looks more like a wild animal has been tearing at him.
So they're like, be cautious. Back to Justin in that core room.
I was going to say, at this stage here, I distinctly, because I hadn't seen anything about this film before I saw it.
Yeah.
I didn't even know it was going to be a horror.
Yeah.
But all of these cues leading up to this were of Alien.
Yeah.
And it was not too long after I had really gotten into the aliens stuff.
Yeah.
And I'm watching this thing, and there's all this sort of alien sort of looking
well, you were thinking that there was going to maybe be a creature, right?
And then, there's like this body that has been looks like it's been torn out. And so you're just going, okay, there's something on board here.
Yeah. So that's the impression you get, is that there is something. So it does, from that moment, the dead body, it cuts back to Justin in the core. And he's saying that there's a weird reading of life. And there's kind of this moment in this minute with Justin, because he looks at the core. And this is what then happens time and time again in the film. But he kind of looks at the core, and it's almost like then time for him is one, that something is happening. And then for everyone else, because then on the other end, it kind of cuts back to, Captain Miller and that. And it's like they've lost contact with him.
Yes.
He's gone.
His video feeds is gone.
Everything's kind of like gone, even though he then in that moment, which we get to see, he's still sort of just taken in the room.
Isn't it funny, though, it's analog static?
Yeah.
Whereas you think they'd be using digital cameras, in which case you just get those weird JPEG sort of blocking.
Yeah, you get those
effects,
blocking.
And then it just go blank. Because,
90.
Back in the day, they had flat screen little panels though.
They did, didn't they?
Communicating with. That's pretty good.
Just people were used to
They weren't
the analog.
touchscreen though.
People were used to the analog.
Yeah.
And so his signal breaks up and all that kind of stuff, and the core comes alive with the lights. They all start flashing at him and doing a weird thing. They stop, don't they?
Synchronize.
They synchronize and stop. That's a good way to put it. He puts his hand to the core.
Yeah, the core, which was all bumpy and spiky and rough, stops and turns flat black.
It does. And so he like puts his hand there and it's melted.
It's like
metal.
Yeah, it's like black oil or something.
And so he's putting his fingers in, his finger in it, he's putting his hand in, and then all of a sudden it's like something that grabs him.
Yeah.
And he's pulled into it.
Had he watched Stargate, he wouldn't have been quite so keen to do that.
Well, I didn't think... I mean, so many times in these movies, they're so keen to put their hand in these things, aren't they?
He's in a spacesuit for a reason, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, anyway.
And, I mean, it's great because he's got some sort of tether, and that just like...
Yeah, whizzes out. It's like
I love
Jaws.
that. Always love that. Yeah.
It's like Jaws has grabbed him.
It is.
And he whizzes off.
And they're all frantic, like, something's been pulled in.
Hits the end, it goes clunk and crashes a little bit out, and sparks fly. A lot of sparks in this movie. Goodness knows why they have so many fireworks in their spaceship. And that goes tight, and then Cooper, I think, goes charging down the line. He's the rescue technician or whatever it is. I'm not sure what that means, but he chases, pulls himself down this line because there's still zero gravity in there. Yeah,
and like the core kind of like blows out, doesn't it? It's like there's an electromagnetic kind of...
Just as Cooper's reaching down the air, and it sort of spits
Justin
back out, and they bump each other and go flying towards a wall, and I was convinced they're going to get skewered.
Yeah.
But they missed the spikes. Actually, no one got skewered on those spikes.
No, I know.
For all the spikes, no one got skewered. No. Even when Peters dropped. So they land, boom, just as... it explodes back.
And it like damages the ship and also the Lewis and Clark.
Yeah, the Lewis and Clark gets seriously damaged. And then the gravity turns back on. And all of the coolant goes splushing down. And the body that's floating in the bridge falls to the deck and shatters, which is very cool. I'm going to guess they must have actually made like a gelatin body or something and
something
froze
like
it.
that.
Yeah, so cool.
And because of the Lewis and Clark being damaged, they all have to retreat onto the event horizon now. Because the Lewis and Clark wasn't safe, the oxygen's out.
Venting atmosphere too fast.
Yeah. So they get on there, and what's great here as a writing thing for a feature film is that they kind of like reassess what's going on and what the situation, and what they have on the event horizon is about 20 hours of air.
A time clock.
Yeah, they have a time clock.
Blake Snyder would say.
Yes.
They've got and they keep mentioning it as the time ticks down. They've got a deadline. It's not like, this has got regenerating air and gravity and there was enough food and supplies on here for a crew
for months of time. Yeah,
how many for months? You're like, we got plenty of time.
We got less than a day.
We just make our way slowly and surely.
Instead, we're on a ship that's probably going to kill us, and we've got 20 hours of air. So either way, we're going to die.
And we don't want to take the ship because the thing is, they didn't want to stay on the event horizon.
No,
to come back because they could have done that as well.
Yeah,
but they sort of went no. What was the name that Smith? Smith, they call him Smith. I'm sure of it, but Smith, the Sean Pertwee, John Pertwee's son. If I'm not even going to mention the show that John Pertwee was on, in case he comes back in time and gets me, but takes me away on adventures.
Yeah.
Yes, but so Smith, he's constantly saying, "I am not staying on the ship. I'd rather spend 12 hours out in the spacesuit working on the Lewis and Clark than spending a minute in the ship." So they're all like repairing the ship, and they're going to bring resources from the event horizon into the ship rather than bring all the resources from Lewis and Clark into the event horizon.
So we sort of have this like task on hand, like you just meant. Smith and Cooper are going to try to fix the Lewis and Clark. At the same time, Cooper is saying that he saw the liquid that Justin was involved with, but it doesn't make any sense. Weir is kind of saying, "Oh, you might have hallucinated that."
Yeah, Weir was
like
being
straight away. Weir was more holding back, and Captain Miller was like, "Ugh," and he pulls him up on it, doesn't he? He
was quite confrontational, saying, "Well, I'm sorry, you were just delusional."
Yeah.
It's like I do like that because at first I'm thinking, "Oh, he's hiding something." Then I was thinking, "Well, no, actually, this is, as we learn later on, this is the ship that he was working so hard on that he ignored his wife, and his wife committed suicide.
So he's got to defend the ship
while he was away. So, like, I get the feeling that if this ship doesn't reveal something or have something, it's like his wife's death was, totally pointless. So, but he's also doing the real hardcore science person. I think I got the impression when I was watching at that point, because we haven't learned about the suicide yet.
Yeah.
We know that his wife is dead, but we don't know, did she die?
Like, how did she die?
Incidentally, or was it important? We don't know yet. I got the feeling that he was doing that real science denial person, as in, not science denial, but as in he's strongly saying, no, what you are saying does not make any scientific sense.
Yes, yeah.
But at the same time, because, as we learn later, he doesn't know what the heck is actually going on inside that ball. Like, he set up conditions, but he doesn't really know what it is. I think he's really trying to convince himself also that there's nothing else going on, because he's been having these visions as well.
Yeah, and that's the moment in this discussion anyway that he reveals to the captain that it is like using a black hole is part of the technology. It's how we've done it. Like, it opens a black hole. And he doesn't actually know what's on the other side of the black hole.
I'm definitely writing a book about a black hole generation based industry.
So, although scientifically, which again as an audience makes sense, like maybe these guys are delusional, maybe they did imagine something, maybe the ship's playing a trick on them, maybe they don't have enough oxygen, this old thing, like you don't have enough oxygen, your brain's playing a trick on you.
Who knows?
Like who knows? So it makes sense, but then he's also saying, well, I don't really know what's in the black hole.
It's a black hole. It's a black hole, and it's who knows?
Who knows? And they go to the core, Weir and Miller, and it's this, they really sort of examine, and that's where we get to see it a bit clearer with the big spikes and the metal, and it's just spinning. It's not the liquid metal at this point in time. And the Miller decides that no one else will come in here. He decides, lock it off. No one else is allowed in. It's closed off. Weir here looks at the core, and this is what I'm saying, that we see it a few times before. He looks at the core and he gets a glint in his eyes, doesn't he? Everyone's pupils kind of... It had happened to Justin, and it happens to Weir here, and it happens to a couple of others later in the film, including Peters, when she kind of gets sucked in. So they kind of have these... and then the captain as well. So they have these moments that if you kind of look at it for too long, it kind of sucks you in.
Yeah, maybe that's sort of a reference to the... is it Nietzsche? He said, you stare into the abyss.
Yes,
you don't know what's staring back at you.
Yes. So then Peters is in the room with Justin. He's in the medical room, and they're kind of doing their thing with him, trying to get him better. And this is where you get some sheer freaky, deaky horror, don't you? That she's there with Justin, and suddenly there's this like... kind of noise, and like she's looking over, there's nothing there, and then it like happens again. She starts walking. All of a sudden, one of the medical bays has got like a tent over it, and there's a hand.
Yeah,
and you're like, holy shitballs, Batman! What the is going to be behind that? And she kind of gets closer to it and pulls it open, and it's her boy, it's her son.
Oh yeah,
and he's got these. Oh, his legs are messed.
Apparently, there was magazine. It didn't spend enough time.
No, it was a real quick, shot, wasn't it?
In the original footage, there was longer on it, and that was one of the ones where people sort of said that was a bit much. Weak, I say.
And she says, "Mummy." The child does say, "Mummy."
Yeah.
And then he's not there. Like she kind of looks away, and he's not there.
Cooper comes up and says, "You're right."
Yeah, which was great. So it was like like he was suddenly there on top of her. So this film played. It's the same in the core. It's like they played off. The same with the hand coming over. Yeah. It's like they didn't give us, the audience, the advantage of seeing everything. They're like, here's a screen, but there's stuff going on around it. You don't always see it.
It's kind of keeping us to the disadvantaged viewpoint of the character.
Yeah.
She couldn't see, and likewise, Captain Miller couldn't see that it was just a glove. He could only see a hand, looked like a hand creeping around the side of his face. He's like, holy crap.
And from there, and again, this is what I'm saying about the narrative. Like, as this has happened with PJ, we suddenly have like the lights go down. There's a huge power drain, and they determine that the core is suddenly draining the ship's power.
Yeah.
And Weir and Miller go down, and this again is this is probably one of my favourite scenes.
Well, Weir says there's must be a shortage in the electromagnetic
So he
containment
uses science language,
Yeah.
again to sort of say, it's nothing spooky. There's probably like a computer chip that's draining power. So he calls into this
like
tunnel.
my laptop, it does
Yeah,
that.
suddenly every now and then it draws power. Fair enough, I can agree with that. So Captain's left in the core, Miller is left there, and Weir goes into this green computer chip tunnel.
Oh.
That must have got you really excited. I mean, honestly,
it was a very exciting. And
the walls, the ceiling of this tunnel are all computer chips.
I did get that feeling again of 2001.
Yeah.
Where he's crawling through Hal's guts. And it's almost a similar, so a bit of an analog there where he's crawling through the guts and he opens up the panel, he starts messing, and he pulls out a little chip.
It's like smoking.
Yeah, he pulls out a chip and looks at it and goes, and then the lights start flickering.
Yeah.
And there's
whispering,
movement and whispering. And he pulls out his torch.
Yeah.
But uselessly, his torch is flickering at the same time as the other lights, which meant that when the other lights are black, his torch is black. And
we've got the whispering, and the camera closes in on him. So it's kind of like punching in on him slowly.
He's breathing heavier.
And he's like looking down one tunnel, looking down another, and you know that there's something freaking in there.
Because he has to be at a crossroads.
Yeah.
I mean,
of course. And he kind of does panic here, which is interesting, because up to this point he was very sciencey about everything, whereas now suddenly it's like, because it was Claire's voice was whispering, and then she's there, isn't she?
Yeah.
For a brief second, and I think she says she's going to show him everything, or show him the ship, or something. She says something like that.
Oh yes, the ship has so many things that it wants you to see.
Yeah, something like that. Come here. And again, we cut from that to Justin awakening, and
he grabs up and he starts frothing at the mouth and carrying on.
Yep.
So
and he talks about the dark
is coming,
and he kind of goes back out.
Has a snooze.
And the captain, he's back in the core, and that's the thing, like, he's kind of like, Miller, he is Miller, he's like, Weir, and Weir's down the computer chip tunnel not answering him back because he's freaking out with Claire, and then we've got this, like, Burning Man coming out of the core, don't we?
Yeah, not the cool sort of alternative party that happens in
like, he's
California.
literally a man on fire, and Miller just kind of, like, stares at him, doesn't do anything, just stares him down, I think.
Yeah.
That's the power of Lawrence Fishburne.
Well, what you going to do, really?
And this is where they kind of like, they have a scene where they start talking and people get freaking violent, don't they?
Yeah.
Smith's
not happy with Weir and just jump on him. And then DJ goes all freaky. And this is one of those ones where he's like, this is one of those things talking about where the core seems to take over, and he's suddenly got like a scalpely thing up against his throat.
Yeah.
And he says, nothing's going wrong, it's all okay, it's all fine. And everyone else in the room's going, holy shit, DJ.
Yeah, that just escalated a bit quickly.
Let's back it off a little bit.
Yeah. So they kind of like, they calm down, and the captain tells them all to go do different things, but they're all a bit like, oh, okay. Stick away from DJ, he's a psycho. Stark then reveals to Miller that she thinks the ship is alive.
Yes.
And is actually, what if the ship is reacting to things that they're doing?
Yeah, an immune response.
Yeah, like an immune response, which is really, and he kind of like scoffs that off. Oh, you silly woman, don't say that to me.
Yeah.
He doesn't agree with her at that point. And they have, at this point, they have about 10 hours. So again, the ticking clock's clocking along. And there's a great scene here. I mean, again, this is like a bit of a favorite in horror because PJ is in the medical suite. No, PJ. Peters, sorry.
Peters.
I'm missing Peters and DJ. Peters is in the medical suite with Justin. He's passed out he's unconscious on a table. She's pacing the room up and down, and the camera follows her. So again, it's like we see Justin and her, and Justin goes out of shot. She paces down one all the way to the end. She paces back. He's gone.
Yeah,
This is a dude that was
she
unconscious.
paces a couple of times and he's there. He's there.
And then he's gone.
In the audience, you're going, when's he going to go?
Yeah.
Because you know he's going to...
Yeah. Or someone's going to appear.
It's the same as a good old mirror. You know, the bathroom mirror. They're looking there, doing their bit of makeup or the tooth. They open the mirror door, get something out, close the mirror. Someone's behind them.
Yeah. And what has he done? He's put himself in an airlock to be sucked out of the ship and die, obviously.
Yeah.
And so they all, Stark, Smith, and Peters, they're all like trying to talk him back, but he's off in the core, he's talking about the dark stuff. And he's like, once you see what I've seen, blah, blah, blah. And he presses at the airlock and it's got 30 seconds. And Miller is like coming, because Miller's outside the ship trying to fix it. He's pacing towards him and we've got this great, cutting from Miller trying to get there in time to them telling him.
After the alarm goes, Justin sort of wakes up.
And he's back to being
and he's
him.
like, I don't want to die.
No, I don't want to actually die.
Stop it. And they say, we can't. Stop it. It's already started cycling.
Yeah, you all got to stop it from
and then
the
he's
inside.
going, I can't breathe. And oh my God.
And Miller starts saying to him, look, put yourself in a ball. Take a big, breathe out all your air. I'm going to catch you.
Hold your eyes.
Don't worry about your eyes. And we've got this kind of trail of blood starting to pour out of his eyes and all those sort of mouth.
Nice.
Probably his butt, as they would say.
Actually, I'm going to talk about some research about that later.
Captain actually gets there, doesn't he? So the ship ejects him and he catches him and brings him back in. And he's just blood splashing everywhere and all that sort of stuff.
Just in time.
But he does save him.
That was his nickname.
Yeah. And this is where Weir is starting to get a bit trippy when it cuts back to him. He's starting to go a bit loopy.
In the captain's chair.
Yeah, he's been a bit loopy. He's not quite there yet, but he's kind of being a bit funny. He's taken the power position back. He definitely takes over the captain's chair. And Captain and Weir, they have this little debate about what's going on in this situation. And this is where Captain Miller on his own hears voices and he hears about, he puts his head, which is typical. He's being a captain, he has to take the stress of everyone, but he puts his head on the ship and that's when he hears the voices.
Yeah, he gets a little flashing vision.
And so he has that sort of thought of, maybe Stark was right, that the ship is controlling us or, doing something to us at that same time. And this is where he has that reveal, and it is to DJ, isn't it? That he reveals that on a previous mission, he locked the doors on a fire that was killing a colleague to save himself and save other people.
Yeah, that's his sin.
Yeah, it's his sin.
He has to repent for that.
And he also says, DJ says, well, you have never told me that. And he goes, I have never told anyone that story.
The ship knows my secrets.
The ship knows the secret.
Now, is this where DJ reveals that he's translated more?
Yeah.
Of the message?
Yeah, and what does he translate?
It was liberate et tu mea or something like that, as opposed to liberate me, which means save me, save yourself.
And there's a little bit more.
And this is a beautiful horror bit, isn't it? Where it wasn't a distress call; it was a warning.
Yeah.
The phone call is coming from upstairs.
Yeah.
Sort of thing. Yeah.
The phone call is coming from inside the room.
Inside your house.
But he's also it's not save me. It's save yourself from hell.
Yeah, and it plays the rest of it from hell.
There's actually another word
Ex
there.
infernus.
Yeah, from hell. And he's and that's what it's they have this kind of vision, don't they, of the ship, of everyone killing each other.
Well, who is it? Stark.
That happens a bit later.
No, Peters has been working on the log.
That comes in a bit later, but it is there, yeah. And then this is where they go to they're trying to get off, and Weir says they can't leave. But Captain is ordering them to get off, gather the supplies, gets out. Peters, as you mentioned before, Peters and Smithy, I think they're getting the oxygen cells or something. What was it?
Yeah, down in the core. For some reason, the carbon dioxide scrubbers are in the core.
In the core, of course.
Which is a strange place to put them, but sure.
Sure, they're there.
I would have thought you put them up with crew quarters, but
Yeah, and so while she's there,
engineering.
she looks into the core and gets a bit of a flash. And as an audience now, you know what's going to happen.
Nothing good.
No, and this little boy runs in front of her and he goes up the steps. And so she follows him up. She's like, son. And he's like, mommy, and she follows him up and up and she carries him. And there's a great moment that suddenly she sees him and he turns and she like steps towards him. And of course, it's like this illusion that there's a hole.
Yeah, there's a gap there.
Mind the gap. Yeah, and she falls.
And that is a brutal fall.
It's a brutal fall.
That's one of those Homer Simpson style down the cliff falls, not a falling through clear space to land clunk on the floor.
No.
She hits stuff,
Yeah.
and her body goes limp as a rag doll. I do not doubt it was a rag doll,
Yeah.
but I've seen enough motorcycle accidents and things to see.
It's a heavy fall.
That moment when someone loses consciousness and their body does actually just go like that, clunk, 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 bang, crash on the ground, splash.
It's just kind of, half in water, half out of water.
Yeah, and her legs are like, what are they? The compound external fractures, and she's done.
She's done.
But she's not quite dead, so you know she's suffering badly. That's important to know. It's a horror film.
Yeah. And so Weir actually comes into the core and he discovers her body. But he kind of like goes to her and he actually shows, like a bit of mercy.
Yeah, a bit of compassion there.
And for a moment, like he's like, oh God, like he wants to help her. But then he sees his wife and it's actually then his wife at another time. And she's getting ready for a bath. Like she's really doling herself up and getting naked and, she puts on makeup. But she's looking very cold and he's talking to her and she's not responding. It's very much here The Shining. There's a real moment of The Shining in this scene, the Stanley Kubrick version. And she hops into the bath and she's got that razor, doesn't she?
Yeah, the razor.
Yeah, and so she slits her wrists and he's kind of pleading with her, no, not again. Which is interesting because it's like, it's obviously so real to him that, this is like his wife killed herself and then he's getting to watch it again and again.
Yeah, and he's apologizing for working so hard.
Yeah, and which when you think about the irony of all this is like hell. Like that would be hell, wouldn't it? Like you're watching as someone's married, I'm married too, like watching your wife commit suicide time and time again would be a version of hell.
Yeah, I know.
So this is something that is very disturbing, I felt, like I did get it. And so he rips his own eyes out.
Well, that's because she appears to him, standing in front of him, dripping, and he sort of, hugs into her. Yeah. And this is where she says, I have such sights to show you. And he looks up. And she puts her hands out and it looks like she's about to gouge his eyes out, but it actually cuts to him. He's
gouging his eyes
face.
out. Yeah, it's great, isn't it? Like as a movie.
Yeah,
I don't mean it's great as in what's going on, but I mean it's cool as a movie.
And that's very Clive. That's very Clive Barker.
It is
that sort of.
And the thing is, like, there's a movie in the 90s. It is before this movie, I'm sure, with Sam Neill called The Mouth of Madness. Did you ever see that? It's a horror. It's not science fiction.
I saw the video cover, but I never got it.
Yeah, and I mean I think Sam Neill did a couple of, like, I'm sure I never Googled it before we did this, but it's like, I'm sure it's a pretty similar vintage. And it's funny, like, he sort of did a couple of these movies in a row that are quite hellish.
And then Jurassic Park.
No, well, Jurassic Park was before this.
Was it 96, Jurassic Park?
Oh, no, like 94.
Was that old?
Yeah. It's older than this.
Jurassic Park 3 was 99 or something.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. At least 94, maybe even 92, but I feel like it's 94.
Anyone wants to come in and tell us?
Tell us. Maybe that will be a classic one day, Surrey, as well.
I think it is.
Anyway, so he gouges his eyes out. Then the ship, they get the message that Miller gets the ship that the Lewis and Clark is ready. So they're going to like get onto that, get off this freaking ghost ship. And just when they finish it all, Smithy sees Weir on the Lewis and Clark.
Yeah, walking out.
And he's actually exiting back out onto the event horizon. And he tells Miller this. And Miller warns him that...
Well, Miller looks down and he sees there's a missing explosive from the central corridor.
From the central corridor. And so he's like warns Smithy that there may be a bomb. And so Smithy is then looking, and he finds it. And he's like,
Finds it in his own locker.
But Miller's saying, get off the ship. But he's like, finds it, he opens it, 5 seconds left.
5 seconds left.
Too late.
The thing is, there was a button there that said disarm.
Yeah.
He didn't even try pressing it.
No.
He just looked down and just got blown up.
Got blown up.
Well, you know.
And Cooper was on the edge of the wing or whatever it was, repairing it.
This was a funny scene.
Yeah, and he got like flung off into space, didn't he?
Yeah, and we cut back to him later on, and he's like on this chunk of the spaceship, going, "Oh shit! Wow, where am I? Oh, bloody
what do
hell!"
I do?
I always thought that was a little bit comical.
It was.
And he's, I'll just blow my thing, and off he goes. I'm coming back, bitches.
Yeah. But before that, we cut to then Weir. DJ gets a warning from Miller that be careful, Weir's freaking loopy.
Yeah, if you see him,
take, he's like, yeah, no worries, I'm a psycho. And he turns and he's there, and he like picks him up and he throws him across the room and all this. He's definitely got his power over him, and he gets the bloody fish hooks out.
Oh, yeah.
And we sort of like, we have a moment there. He's got a couple of fish hooks, and then it's cut to this wide shot, and he's strung up.
That's where Miller walks in and finds DJ strung
yeah.
up. And see, that is, if that's not Hellraiser, I don't know what is.
That is.
Having your skin pulled back like that.
I know.
Well, the thing is that hanging, there was an American native tribe that would do that. Well, they wouldn't do it to like killing them, but as in people would voluntarily hang from their skin in that fashion, for various reasons. But for example, to bring rain, or as a
sacrifice,
a vision quest type thing where they're trying to find some inspiration. It not quite as gruesome when they did it as a ceremonial thing, because they were meant to live. They're just meant to be a task or a harrowing.
This guy
He's not going
to live.
He was spread open like a display.
Yeah. And Miller then discovers Stark, who's unconscious, and Weir is in the captain's chair, and he kind of like spins around in that chair, and he's just batshit crazy now, and his eyes
are sewn shut.
He's
got his eye sockets have been sewn shut, and he's got claw marks down his face. He looks every bit like a crazy person.
He does. Cooper, this is what you're saying, like it kind of cuts to Cooper out in the middle, and he's disorientated, and he like plans to use his oxygen to like zoom back. So he does that, and he kind of like fires himself back. And while Weir and Miller are kind of like arguing, and Miller's trying to get the upper hand of him.
Weir is basically saying, you're not leaving the ship, you're coming back with me. Yeah. He sets a 10-minute timer for the core to start.
That's right. He starts the core, doesn't he? He starts the core, which will open the black hole. That's what he actually does, doesn't he? I'm jumping. He says, I'm going to open it up to show you what's really... Like, what if we just open a door,
Why do these people always want to show you these terrible things?
Yeah. Well, I mean, if the ship came back from this other side...
Kind of like, when you smell an open carton and go, oh, that smells terrible. Smell this.
Smell this, Mark.
And you're like... And for some reason, your first instinct is to go and smell it.
And go, oh, that's gross.
You got to make a conscious effort.
Come smell this.
Check out, this is so disgusting.
It's really good. I think so. So he does. He sets the clock. It's going to be 10 minutes, and it's going to actually open. The core starts doing its thing to open the black hole and unleash hell, I suppose, is the idea. And I think it must have been around here that they all
bumps into the window.
Yeah.
And it sort of breaks this tension.
Yes.
And rather than shooting at Miller, he shoots
at Cooper.
And it goes chung through the glass, and that's when Miller like dives away, and poor Cooper gets blasted back out.
He does.
And the window smashes out.
So everything's getting sucked out of there.
Everything's getting blown out into the space, and the bolts on the chair that Weir is sitting on are starting to rattle and carry on, and the Captain Miller then has to struggle. He flops and flaps and finally grabs a cable, pulls himself through the door, and Stark wakes up and screams for help, and she says, no, like, don't worry or something. He says, no, I'm not leaving another person behind. Except he doesn't say it like that. He says it like Lawrence Fishburne, and with a bit of a struggle, and will she, won't she?
With the door about to shut.
Yeah. They manage to get through, and it closes. Patushka.
They survive.
And they come up with a new plan, don't they?
They do. A new plan. to take us into the last moment.
Last moment, they're going to
Detonate.
blow the central corridor,
Yep.
blast the alien out the airlock, and wait for the central. No, they're going to blow away the inner corridor and use the front part as a lifeboat because the gravity couches are still working.
Yep.
And they'll just hibernate and put on the distress beacon. And they'll wait to be rescued because they don't have enough air to wake up and do anything. So
That's right.
So Stark starts readying the front part, the gravity couches and so forth, because good old Justin's still in one of them.
Yeah.
This whole time, and Miller heads on down, flicking the little
Starts
detonate
the bombs
switches,
on, yeah.
and grabs the detonator. There's a part when was it? All the blood comes pouring through.
Well, that's now, yeah.
That is this bit.
So while Miller's setting those bombs, Cooper and that are doing their, getting the lifeboat ready.
Oh, that's right. Because we
The
just
blood
skipped
comes
that spot
running
where
along.
Cooper comes back.
Yeah.
Because he got blown out, and
Yeah.
the captain got blown out.
Yes.
Oh, the captain, Weir got blown out.
Yes.
And then there, Miller
Cooper,
and Stark
suddenly
are going,
they get...
we're finally safe. We can do something.
Yeah.
And then there's bleep, 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 main airlock.
Is open.
And they're going, oh
yeah.
my God. So they grab like axes and stuff.
Yeah.
They're going to thunk whatever comes in. And it's Cooper.
It's Cooper, yeah. That's
Now
right.
it's Cooper and Stark are doing the...
So Cooper and
Yes.
Stark are getting the lifeboat ready. Captain is getting the bombs ready. So they're separate. And with that, Cooper is in this space that the blood starts coming along the ceiling. Like it's really pouring along, isn't it?
Yeah, it's following the light track.
Yeah. And then Stark kind of is doing her thing, and it just like she turns and it just
The
floods.
central aquarium.
Yeah,
I'm not sure what that was. A reservoir for the couches?
Reservoir. Which, look, it's The Shining again. This is a real homage to The Shining of the elevators opening. I was just like, wow, this is exactly like The Shining. Like, it's a real homage. But why not? I mean, if I make a movie one day, I'd love a big corridor of blood to come pouring out of something like this. So if you can do it, and it makes sense because the whole point here was the ship was alive, as a creature. So it was trying to do everything it could. And that's when they say to Miller that we're just going to go. Like, let's just get out of here. We've got to disappear.
Do it now.
And he's kind of almost back at the core. And when he turns, the Burning Man appears and starts, I think he literally throws fire.
Shoots a whole bunch of fire down.
Yeah, and so he's kind of like forced to run back, and he gets into the core, the worst
through
spot.
the closing doors.
Yeah.
So he's locked in the core there.
Yeah, and of course, Weir is there, a naked Weir, all stitched back together randomly. And he says that. He says the ship wanted me back, so the ship brought me back. And he's just a monster, really, at this point, isn't he?
At that point, yeah. And Miller does his best and sort of whacks him a
Tries
few
to fight
times
him,
with
but-
a carbon dioxide bit and piece.
Yeah.
And but
Weir has got
unfortunately, Weir's a bit demonic at this point.
And so he lets him know that, well, there's no way out. He's just going to blow them. So that's what he does. He blows the ship.
Hits the button. The corridor components
All blow up.
The front part
Weir
goes away
blows up.
just as the core starts to open and it sinks down into Neptune.
Yeah.
Where I can assure you that ship would not survive. So either the ship, it wasn't clear whether the ship sort of got sucked back into hell, or if it just got destroyed in Neptune's intensely dense atmosphere and gravity.
Yeah, but either way, it's dead.
It's gone.
It's gone. So they kind of get all ready. They go into the watery sleep stations, and we actually get 72 days later. And this time we have a repeat of what happened earlier to Weir, which is Stark. So Stark kind of like is woken by the rescue team, and Weir is one of them without the
pulls
eyes.
the helmet off.
And it's Weir. And then she wakes up, and in fact, it's the rescue team. But the rescue team is sort of like saying to them, we're going to make this happen, and it's all emergency. It's a real sort of ending on a drama, isn't it? It's not ending on a happy moment.
Well, mind you, though, and I want to point out here, when the doors open, so 76 days later, the doors...
72.
72, yeah. The doors open, and these suited dudes with like this useless flashlights that I always have in movies and TV shows. I remember the X-Files. These flashlights which were just like laser beams.
Surely the FBI has better flashlights.
It looks good because it gives you this really strong beam. It just doesn't light anything up. but that was just pure the start of. Oh, guys, got some sneezes cracking along here.
Yeah.
The very start of Aliens, where it says 57 years.
Yeah.
And the doors open, and the dude comes in wearing a big suit and a light shining over the sleep pod of Ripley.
Yeah.
And this is almost exactly the same thing, and the imagery of it looked very similar as well. It you could almost imagine this is in the same universe.
You could.
Why wouldn't they have an Aliens versus Event Horizon versus Predator?
Why not? Why not?
I would go to watch that movie just to see what the hell you would do, where you've got this Hellraiser style horror mixed with Alien and Predator.
Well, Anderson did do Aliens.
He did Aliens vs Predator.
He could just tap them together, couldn't he?
Get that in there. That would be a movie. You'd have to go see it just to know.
You would. Just what would happen in that context. The aliens being freaked out with ghost stuff. But we have Cooper telling Stark, we're safe. And the camera zooms out and it cuts to some awesome 90s techno music again for the end credits. But I don't feel safe, sorry. I don't feel like this is a safe ending.
But I'm going to hunt down that soundtrack. It was released as 4 10-minute sections of music. Yes.
Yeah, it's intense, the ending. That's another intense. So that is the end.
That is the end, yeah. It was, as you said, I could see in the cinemas back in 97 coming in, it would be a hard sell to be a big blockbuster.
Yeah.
But when you start, you look at this from the safety of your home lounge, it's the scenery. Okay, I'm just going to cut straight to undercut some of your stuff. Some of the things that I noticed about scenery. Number one, the Lewis and Clark was just totally the main ship of the Sulaco of the aliens.
Yes.
Down to the point where I was wondering if they used the same scenery or settings at all. And then when they got on board the ship, the Event Horizon, it had all of this sort of Gothic archways and cathedral-like finishes, and down in the core room, and I've been to plenty of cathedrals when I was in Germany and France, and they've got all that fine detail work and little spikes and gargoyles and bits, and most of the doorways, particularly from the halfway through to the end of the film, the doorways and passages were coffin-shaped. Yeah. In fact, when Peters was following the kid, she was stepping through coffins. Yes. Each of those things with little coffins with like sort of almost look like rivets, like oversized rivets around it, like iron coffins. Yeah. And it was just, it totally thrilled me. And then the front part of the ship wasn't a lot better because it had the look of almost like one of these 1890s asylums. Yeah, it did, didn't it? These weird columns. Yep. From the sort of curving up from the floor to a column up to the ceiling, plated in silvery metallic plating. It looked like Victor Frankenstein's laboratory. Yeah, it did. Where he's raising the creature, and with bits of equipment hanging off and flashing. It was just, again, the imagery in this was so well done. Where Alien they moved from the Sulaco down into this sort of industrial become organic phallic sort of intestinal looking spaces. In this one they moved into what does appear to be like this Gothic cathedral old horror. You could almost imagine Nosferatu creeping about in there. It was you could I didn't notice much of that the first time I watched it. No, definitely not. But now I'm watching it just going, wow, there's some serious thought went into the symbology and the alignment of action and images, and it was fantastic. It was. So what about the ladder? So this is the classic ladder, these films. This is our 5th one. So for me, I'm actually putting this in at my 3rd rung. So I've got the 2001 as my top rung, Back to the Future's 2nd, and then Event Horizon comes in on my 3rd rung, followed by Predator, followed by Aliens. That is my classic ladder result. As I said, this isn't necessarily
saying that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 or anything, but it's just kind of roughly that maybe where they sit.
I've just got mine in alphabetic order.
That's fine.
At the moment, which puts Event Horizon just above Predator, but I have very little basis on which to arrange it, because I could arrange them differently based on the number of times I've seen them.
Yep.
Versus the number of times I want to see them again, versus how influential they were to this genre, and so forth. And that would produce different orderings each time.
Yeah, I think we talked a bit about this, especially when we did Back to the Future, which is our last classic, episode 20. I felt that it's kind of like almost I'm ranking the feeling I'm getting from these, if that makes sense. Like it's kind of like, because all of these are really great classic sci-fi films, so it's kind of like they don't necessarily like to put this film, a R-rated horror, up against Back to the Future, which is a comedy in a way, like a science fiction comedy.
Maybe a PG comedy?
I think it is PG. Like they're not at all. You can't compare them at all, really. They're just totally different audiences, different markets, different structures. But at the same time, it's like sort of like, what does the vibe of the film? It's all about the vibe. Sorry, it's all about the vibe. Yes. So it's like the vibe of this film. Like I was really impressed with Event Horizon, like the pace of that drama, like a non-stop, you held your breath really the whole way through it. And I really was probably more impressed this time than when I saw it when I was younger. And I think it comes down to the homage. I think it comes down to maybe just me being older and kind of getting it a bit better.
Yeah.
And maybe also I expected, you said it before, and I felt like maybe teenage Mark expected this film to have aliens. Yeah. And when it didn't, maybe I was a bit disappointed. Whereas at the age I'm at now, I'm like, oh, this really kind of like ticked a lot of those horror aspects.
It does a really good job. It does. So
it's more about like, like Weir's the bad guy in a way, isn't he? Like it's a psychological horror.
Horror things you're going, they've got this sort of weird mystery. We start with the that message that they, save us in Latin, but there's all screams and static, and there's something pretty wrong about that.
Yeah.
But then there's this isolation, and they can no longer depend on each other. That everyone becomes unreliable, and maybe
they can't trust their own mind.
They become a victim of their environment as much as anything else. The fact they're in space. All these horror elements which are required, but then some good hard science fiction stuff in there talking about, because they referred to firing gravitons, and gravitons are gravity is one of these ones which hasn't been well fit in. So if you're looking at one side of things, you want to talk about fields have a carrier particle. Now, and the way I'm not being terribly specific is I can't remember which is classical, which is quantum. So one way of looking at it, let's say quantum physics, we're talking about, and correct me if I'm wrong here because I don't have this on my notes exactly, but you're talking about fields have particles that make up carry the field. So the electromagnetic field is carried by photons, for example. The strong force is carried by like quarks or something, and the weak force by something else I can't quite remember now.
Sounds good to me.
But there's basically every force every field should be an exchange of a particle. So when a photon goes from point A to point B, if it's moving relative to another particle, a photon, you get electromagnetic or electric field force, and if it's moving relative to a body of electrons, you get electromagnetic force. And so the theory then, gravity is being this field, what particle carries gravity?
Yeah.
So what particle is exchanged between two bodies in order to form this field?
Sounds good.
They recently found the Higgs boson, which is the particle which carries mass. And what does that mean? I'm not really sure. It's one of these crazy deep physics sort of things. But so mass is intrinsic to gravity, but it's not gravity.
Yeah, right.
Because mass is affected by gravity.
Yeah.
So some particle is interacting with this Higgs boson this is the theory, because there's also other theories, and this is where gravity doesn't fit in very well, and that would be called a graviton. So then if you could generate gravitons, for example, as hypothesized from a black hole, then yes, you could start manipulating space-time.
Right.
Because space-time is curved by gravity. This is what a gravity well is basically the curvature of space-time. Which is why when you are at a lower potential gravity versus a higher potential gravity, time appears to move differently in relation to one another. So if you remember that movie Interstellar, where they
I have not seen it.
You've not seen it?
No.
Oh, you should see it.
We need to add it on to
They go to a planet which is in a deep gravity well, and there's a time difference. But anyway, so they're talking about this sort of hard science is referring to concepts, and he dances around by not using specific stuff.
Yeah.
Because the other side of physics says that fields don't have to have particles, and there's no evidence yet of a graviton as such. But he dances around this, and a black hole would be something you'd need in order to warp and curve space-time. And to get it's thought that a black hole has a corresponding, what they refer to as a white hole, which is to say the black hole everything's going into, so where is it going into? And so there's this thought that, well, maybe it's going into another pocket of the universe which has a different space-time configuration to our own.
Yeah, and that would be the white hole.
Which would, is a white hole. And so there's a thought perhaps travel could be achieved through black holes.
Yeah.
And when I say this is one of those fields of physics where basically no, you can't do it. But if you were to look at the mathematics in a certain light and plug in the right numbers and tilt your head to the side a little bit, you can. Which is to say that it hasn't been utterly ruled out, but it's just not something we should really concern ourselves with in a practical sense. It's more of a thought experiment.
Yeah.
But so there's all these great science fiction elements that are in Event Horizon with all this strong horror. I have been struggling to find another movie that marries both so strongly.
Yeah.
Because there's a number which use a science fiction backdrop in order to introduce horror, which you could say was sort of science fiction horror, like The Thing, which is about the alien life form they find in Antarctica. That's on Netflix. The newer version, I would say the new version. I love the old John Carpenter one.
Yeah.
The new one. And then there are others which are then science fiction, which borrow a couple little horrific details. I mean, even that movie Gravity with Halle Berry.
Yeah.
Could be said to sort of borrow some horror. It's got time.
Sandra
clocks.
Bullock.
Sandra Bullock. Why does they? No, Halle Berry's in that TV show Existence, or whatever it was. So no, Sandra Bullock is in Gravity.
Yeah, Gravity.
Yeah, horror elements. There's isolation. There's dangers and time clocks and things, but it doesn't have that sort of villainy. It doesn't have the punishing sin.
No,
sort of morality.
Yeah, Gravity's more survival.
Yeah, it's a survival thriller.
Yeah,
but as a result, I can't think of too many.
No, I can't either.
Actual science fiction, actual horror at the same time. Alien is in there.
Yeah,
but it's just not common. I think it's a lot of hard work because horror is usually done on the cheap because of the difficulty in finding audiences. Yeah,
and I mean, look, like the horror in this, like you've mentioned, it's those scenes that the shots they show us of the horror. Like it's the Clive Barker, it's the blood and the gore, and
there's
the
like
screaming
people
and
like
screeching,
biting and chewing into and ripping people, and then like there's someone's hand going into someone's mouth, and then someone was like vomiting up chunks of something, and there's someone was having sex, and
and I mean even with Weir, like the fact that he gouges his eyes out, and then they're sewn back together, and then when he comes back as well at the end, like he's been stitched back together, but it's like all these veins are bloodied, and like it's not at all like he's a monster, and the whole film there is no alien, but the presence of this evil monster makes it like a hellish nightmare, like which is pure horror, really, But then there's so much science in it,
Yeah, and one bit there, so I foreshadowed this earlier about some research I was reading about.
So this is the main science you want to talk about?
So surviving in a vacuum.
Yeah.
Because this movie was one of the first movies to go against the grain of every other movie that shows someone experiencing sudden decompression or a vacuum or space. Imagine you can Total Recall, for example, drops out into Mars, and his eyeballs are bulging, and he pops and terrible death. And other people they drop into space and they immediately turn to frozen corpses and so forth. Whereas the reality is, we have very good evidence to show that you would probably survive for up to about a minute and a half.
Yeah.
And certainly, this guy was only exposed for 20 seconds, 30 seconds. So certainly very, very survivable, uncomfortable. So I'll just...
And I mean, in this, they make it, like we described it, they make it uncomfortable from the moment the airlock starts decompressing, don't they? I mean, he starts pissing blood out of him before he's even outside the ship.
Yeah, so let's just...
I mean, it's the extreme uncomfortableness.
Get this here. So we're looking at going into a vacuum, and of course death is not instantaneous. So I was just reading up here on Scientific American. There's this fellow, what's his name? Bucky. Dr. J. Bucky. He is a medical school professor. He's also a former NASA astronaut. And he released a book in 2006 called Space Physiology, where he's specifically done all this research in space physiology. And he points out, of course, being in a vacuum will be deadly because you've got no oxygen, if nothing else. You end up with, you get the bends, so gases dissolved in the blood, form bubbles. Your blood flow basically sort of stops. 15 seconds you'll be unconscious, and you will die.
Yep.
But death is not instantaneous. So one 1965 study by researchers at the Brooks Air Force Base in Texas showed that dogs exposed to a near vacuum, that's like 1/300 of an atmosphere of pressure, for up to 90 seconds, always survived. During their exposure, they were unconscious and paralyzed. So we're not talking about just exposing poor living, conscious dogs, but even still, it's a bit rough. 1965, different time, I suppose. So gas expelled from their bowels and stomachs, causing simultaneous defecation, projectile vomiting, and urination, which is what we were talking about earlier. They suffered massive seizures. Their tongues were often coated in ice, and the dogs swelled to resemble, in quotes, an inflated goatskin bag. But after slight repressurization, the dog shrank back down, began to breathe, and after 10 to 15 minutes at sea level pressure, they managed to walk. It took a few more minutes for their apparent blindness to wear off. So, 90 seconds, and the dogs took a few minutes, 10, 15 minutes.
And they're sort of back to
normal. And then they're kind of, I don't think they were feeling good, but they were not dead.
Yeah, right.
However, dogs held at a near vacuum for 2 minutes or more basically died. They died. Terrible. Chimpanzees, oddly enough, can withstand longer exposure. So there's a pair of papers from NASA in 1965 and 67. These poor animals. But how are you going to find out about this? Otherwise, researchers, because they're going to send people into space, and they want to tell these astronauts, yes, we know what's going to happen. So they chucked a couple of chimpanzees. They could survive up to 3.5 minutes in vacuum conditions with no apparent cognitive defects. One chimp that was exposed for 3 minutes, however, showed lasting behavioral changes. Another died shortly after exposure. But there were some that would last 3.5 minutes, no problems.
So, the fact that Justin went out for about 40 seconds probably in total, didn't he? Including the decompressing kind of the chamber.
We do have a human story. So in 1965, a technician inside a vacuum chamber at the Johnson Space Center in Houston accidentally depressurized his spacesuit by disrupting a hose. So this is similar to these cases where astronauts in the movies will, get a leak. So after 12 to 15 seconds, he lost consciousness. He regained it at 27 seconds after his suit was repressurized to about half that of sea level. He reported that his last memory before blacking out was of the moisture on his tongue beginning to boil, as well as a loss of taste sensation that lingered for 4 days following the accident. he was otherwise unharmed. So it's 27 seconds. So I think that's quite fascinating. So Justin, he would be in that category, that 30 seconds-ish. He would have suffered, like, as it showed in there, he sort of some of his blood starting to boil out. His tongue would have been hurt. His eyes would have hurt. But based on these experiments and things, he probably would have recovered to full functionality within, let's call it a few days, a few weeks of recuperation.
So, I mean, the interesting thing, which the film doesn't touch on, but is that he's looked into the core. He saw things.
He was in there and brought back out. So his body might be okay. I have a feeling that he will never quite be the same.
And that's what I was just going to say. Like, because everyone else that sort of actually did glimpse the core died. So he's the only one that saw, whereas Stark didn't look at it and Cooper didn't look at it.
No, they only experienced peripheral.
Yeah, sort of thing. They saw the outside stuff. So, yeah, he comes back with memories of the core. Yeah, his body's going to be okay, but I would hate to think about what sort of life he's going to have after that. You could hope the trauma was sufficient to induce amnesia. And then maybe like one day when he's like 70 or 80, he suddenly remembers and goes, oh my God. Ah! Yeah, he'd probably be a bit like soldiers' PTSD.
Yeah, he'll be
post-traumatic.
He'll seem fine, and then suddenly he'll have like a memory of like
being in the core.
Like, yeah.
Seeing hell.
As if he were actually there.
Because he had that, remember they did show us that flash where he's like in hell?
Yeah, there was
like he's actually one of the ones in hell.
Yeah, there's that looked quite horrendous.
Like I don't know if he's on a crucifix or something, like he's literally in hell sort of thing,
On the original footage there was I guess it was a 2-hour movie was the first rough cut. So it was an hour and a half. So there's a good half hour of additional footage, and a fair bit of it apparently was gory. So that scene we saw of the log, which what you see is enough to, like, it's so wrong. But apparently that was a longer scene.
Yeah.
So I kind of think it was good that they cut that down, like, because
it
was enough that you got the impression that like there was some really wicked bad stuff going on. Like proper bad. Not just kind of a little bit sinful.
No.
But
you got, the thing is as well, because at that point you knew about Weir gouging his eyes out, that it's kind of like there is no creature doing this to them. They did it to each other. So this crew, that when the ship became the ship and came alive, it created them all to do this to themselves or to each other. And that's really a little bit more horrific, isn't it? Than an alien creeping the corridors. Because all of a sudden it's like you could turn on me and I could turn on you and you could turn on yourself. Like, yeah, it's hell. It's hell on a ship.
Your captain sitting in his chair holding his own eyeballs.
I could have had it a little bit more, but I also because I kind of go, that would have been so much fun to film. Like they would have really enjoyed probably doing that. But then at the same time, in the context of the story, it was nice just to have these tiny little snippets because it's just enough for your brain.
There's bad stuff going there, but it's not
bad enough.
You didn't get enough that you sort of got used to it.
Yeah.
Which I think in some of these films, that are sort of, I guess, torture porn, as they're referred to, these horror films and body horror.
Yeah.
Some of them go a little bit too far, and you get a bit numb to it. You kind of go, he's getting his legs sawn off and a nail hammered into his skull. Okay.
Well, it goes back to Hitchcock, and even before Hitchcock, but Hitchcock kind of made it famous that, you see things, but you don't have to see it all because the brain fills in so much more danger anyway. So in that example, if they'd shown us more of it, well, they would numb us. They would numb us to it. You know? So it's there's a fine line between showing you too much and not so much. And I think, it's interesting. I think about this in this day and age that really because of the internet, you can Google and look at anything, right? So if you're the kind of, you shouldn't. I'm not suggesting it. Yeah, that's right. You can't say it. But what I'm saying is so therefore, when you sit down to watch a movie like this, I mean, you don't need it to show you everything. It's not what you want. If you're the kind of person that needs to see that stuff, well, you can go Google it. It's not the point of the movie. And the point of the movie is to kind of give you a little glimpse to let your imagination run with it,
Yes, very much so.
Yeah.
So you spoke a little bit about some of the Kubrick throwbacks and some of the other bits. What else sort of stood out to you about the cinematography and the way it was filmed?
Well, I'll probably you mentioned the ship before, and I think you were kind of taking it from that artistic or sort of, the building perspective of maybe like old temples or churches, European. I did see that Anderson, apparently him and the set designer got a bit obsessed with European art, like the 16th century, 17th century kind of art. And he was like, that's how he depicted the ship and the hell scenes, was like those sort of ideas of like, so there was a bit of a time place. But to me also, I was, when I was taking in before I looked at that after watching Event Horizon this time. But for me, when I was sort of like taking in the ship thinking it was alive, like all the curvatures of it, there was lots of like, if you took the captain's desk, how it was like plugged in, there was lots of like cables. The captain's desk, the pilot's desk on the Event Horizon actually had cables coming off the top of it. And to me, it was more like veins or like arteries and, that kind of idea. Like it was
central corridor had a very throat
like you said, phallic, but it could have also been like, it seemed like a tube, didn't it? Like it seemed like a breathing apparatus or something. Like really in reality, what the hell was that in scientific terms? Because it just seemed like a big open corridor.
I got the feeling they just wanted to keep the crew. If I was the crew going on there and I saw that such a long corridor down to the drive, I'd be like, that drive's pretty bad, isn't it?
Yeah.
You're trying to keep us as far away as you can engineer us to be away, while still maintaining integrity of the ship.
Yeah. So to me, and then we had wires and then we had literal blood, it's like the ship's blood. But also then connecting to what was interesting, you said it before, the doors to the core had what seemed like the biohazard symbol. And that was an interesting thing because I picked up the same thing. I'm like, oh wow, it's like the it's literally like, isn't that warning him that what's behind the doors? But then in other parts of the ship, like in the medical lab, there was the 3 lights that looked like the biohazard symbol again. And there was, I noticed I wrote it down a few things like, the lights on the ship, the door to the medic room, they actually then had the biohazard symbol. So it's kind of like saying that, well, this ship is
a biohazard.
A biohazard. But the curves and the wires and all that kind of giving us the idea that this is a living organism, and lights that look at you through the dark like eyes. Like, that was the thing with the core. Like once it synced up, it had these lights.
Yeah, all the rings would turn out and the white, and in contrast to everything else in the core, there are these beautiful white headlights.
Soft light headlights,
Yeah, like all in a ring that just sort of catch you. And they just zoom in a close-up of the character's eye, and you'd see the lights reflected in their iris.
Yeah. So that was interesting. In terms of cinematography, we talked a lot about music, the great 90s music, but in terms of cinematography, there was actually some cool moments. Like there was a really cool pool focus scene.
In the green tunnel?
Yeah, in the green tunnel, which is kind of going back to Scorsese. And that was like, so we see it where we have the character kind of almost looks like they grow out of the screen, because and everything kind of comes towards us. Many filmmakers have done it. Goes back to an old Scorsese film from the 70s. And it's very disorientated. That's great. And I think, we have mentioned, like, obviously Anderson has referred to horror like Kubrick with The Shining, Clive Barker like that. But then he's also done 2001, which not really a horror, but science fiction in that regard. So,
that shot where they're coming out of the umbilicus, the first entering. So, the 3 of them are each at a different angle, floating, and the camera, you can't tell the orientation of the camera because none of them are up.
No.
Each of them are 3 of them, almost like the biohazards.
That's right.
The 3 of them are each in a separate orientation. That was just like that. The 2001, where it's on the spaceship where the waitresses, they carefully walk pad, and then they sort of walk up the side and across.
But and there is those homages to 2001 and the funhouse idea of the magnetic room that spins on itself and all that kind of stuff. So, I thought it was a really great film in that way. And also the colour red playing, again, which, I mean, is used in a lot of films like this, red being murder or blood, and that kind of life force idea was definitely used throughout. So yeah, lots of symbols. But see, if you're out there, you can hit us up on Instagram and Facebook and Twitter and let us know what you picked out of Event Horizon. But that's probably about it for tonight. Hey, Surrey?
Yeah, I think so. We're going to call it quits at some point. There's more we can talk about, I'm sure, but let's talk about the fabulous movie that we chose for next week.
So, yeah, if you're out there, you can let us know what you thought about Event Horizon and what we talked about tonight, whether you agreed with what we talked about or what we didn't talk about, and if there's any other bits that you want us to talk about next time. So please check us out on Twitter
at Space Brains Pod
and Instagram and Facebook at
Space Brains Podcast.
Beautiful. And let us know what you thought, any opinions, comments, any films you want us to check out. And that is all. See you later.
See ya.